The impact of President Trump's 145% tariffs on Chinese goods is playing out in real time at American ports.
It all began with silence. No phone calls, no contracts, no shipments, just silence. One by one, American agricultural orders vanished. China stopped buying. Pork contracts dissolved. Soybeans sat untouched in silos. Corn exports were abruptly canceled. Storage facilities filled up. Barges sat idle. And then came the headlines. On May 5th, 2025, the U.S. agricultural industry officially entered crisis mode. This wasn't a drought. It wasn't a flood. It wasn't the natural ebb and flow of the market. This was a full-scale tariff war, one that the U.S. didn't just initiate, but is now clearly losing. It all began with President Donald Trump's sweeping trade order just last month. Tariffs of up to 145% were imposed on Chinese goods. A blanket 10% tariff was placed on all imports. And a new doctrine of reciprocal retaliation targeted every nation running a trade surplus with the US. In response, China hit back hard. They imposed a 125% tariff on every US export, every soybean, every bushel of corn, every gallon of milk, every pound of pork. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an economic blockade. By May 1st, US pork exports had plummeted to a marketing year low. China canceled a 12,000 metric ton pork contract. Meatpacking plants in Missouri began scaling back. Cold storage units were overflowing with unsold product, and it didn't stop with pork. Soybeans, once the crown jewel of American agriculture, are now priced out of the Chinese market. The massive volumes once shipped to Chinese crushers are sitting idle in Iowa and Nebraska. As one farmer put it, "We planted this crop for a customer who just left." Across the Midwest, grain elevators are backed up with unsellable corn. Once a staple of America's export economy, corn is now at risk of being replaced in global markets. Even loyal trade partners like Mexico and Japan are looking elsewhere, and they're not wrong to do so. In a dramatic escalation, the European Union announced retaliatory tariffs. A 25% duty was slapped on US corn, with a second wave targeting soybeans. The message from Brussels was crystal clear. This was a direct response to American tariffs on EU metal exports. Corn farmers in Illinois, who had already lost China, now saw Europe slipping away too. Then came another blow, this time from Mexico. On May 1st, the U.S. Department of Commerce terminated a key agreement with Mexico and imposed a 21% tariff on fresh Mexican tomatoes, effective July 14th. Florida tomato growers were thrilled, but grocery chains were alarmed. Mexican officials were furious. Within a day, Mexico's agricultural ministry floated retaliation, potentially targeting U.S. pork and corn. One Mexican official said it plainly: "If the United States wants to escalate, we are ready to escalate." For U.S. corn growers, this was a red alert. Mexico is their #1 export market. Losing China was devastating. Losing Mexico could be a death sentence. Meanwhile, U.S. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins tried to calm the waters, suggesting a possible aid package for farmers. But her message lacked clarity and conviction. Farmers weren't interested in bailouts. They wanted access to markets. One grain farmer in Illinois summed it up: "Tariffs are a great way to lose your customers, and once they're gone, they don't come back." Still, the administration pushed forward, and the retaliations kept coming. In Beijing, Chinese regulators suspended permits for U.S. beef imports. This sent shockwaves through ranches in Montana and Texas, cutting off access to one of their most profitable markets. China wasn't just imposing tariffs, they ramped up non-tariff barriers too. Longer port inspections, sudden health concerns, and quiet directives telling Chinese firms to avoid U.S. agricultural orders altogether. The result? U.S. exports of dairy, poultry, and wheat dropped overnight. Meanwhile, China began forging new supply chains. It signed major agricultural deals with Brazil and Argentina, locking in long-term imports of soybeans, corn, grain, and beef, deals that once belonged to American farmers. One analyst put it bluntly: China is decoupling, deal by deal, and doing it quietly. And China wasn't alone. India slapped new tariffs on US almonds and apples. Turkey blocked US dairy. South Korea began talks with Brazil to replace American soybeans. The global agricultural trade map is shifting, and at the center of it all, the US farm economy is unraveling. In Iowa, soybeans are selling for less than the cost to produce them. In Minnesota, pork producers are culling herds early because the supply chain is backed up. In Kansas, corn elevators are shutting down due to lack of space. In California's Central Valley, almond growers are watching shipment after shipment get rejected in Asia. Retail food prices are going up, but farm incomes are going down. It's a perfect contradiction. Wall Street is bracing for a major hit. Equipment manufacturers like John Deere have issued profit warnings. Grain trading giants like ADM and Cargill are reporting sharp export declines. Futures markets are swinging wildly with every new trade announcement. Then came Europe's internal backlash. Farmers in Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia flooded the streets in protest. Cheap, tariff-free Ukrainian grain, allowed into the EU as part of a wartime solidarity agreement, had swamped local markets. Polish farmers dumped Ukrainian corn onto highways. Tractors blocked border crossings. Trains were halted. The message was clear. Europe's open-door policy had backfired. In response, the European Commission authorized emergency bans on Ukrainian grain imports into 5 frontline countries. These were, in essence, new tariffs. Ukraine felt betrayed. EU leaders insisted the decision was necessary for political survival. It was solidarity versus sovereignty, and sovereignty won. Back in Washington, Congress is in turmoil. Senators from farming states are demanding an end to the China tariffs. Others are pushing for more. The White House, however, is sticking to its guns. President Trump declared, "This isn't about short-term pain. This is about long-term dominance." But that's a hard sell to a farmer with no customers. Things aren't much better north of the border. After Canada aligned with the US on Chinese steel sanctions, Beijing responded by slapping a 100% tariff on Canadian canola oil, peas, and meal, and a 25% duty on pork and seafood. For Canadian producers, it was nothing short of a death sentence. The Canola Council of Canada issued a stark warning. This crisis could devastate prairie farmers. Ottawa scrambled to respond, launching emergency trade missions to Indonesia and Japan in a desperate search for new buyers. But just like in the US, it was too late. Those markets had already made other arrangements. Then came the price shock. On May 4th, soybean futures briefly spiked to $10.65 per bushel, a 2-month high. But traders were quick to warn that the rally wasn't sustainable. Without consistent Chinese demand, the price ceiling would collapse again. The pork market was in even worse shape. With supply trapped inside the US, wholesale pork prices plummeted, hurting producers, even as grocery store prices continued to climb. Consumers were paying more. Farmers were earning less. And beneath the economic strain, something more volatile was beginning to rise: outrage. Farmer protests erupted across the United States. By the morning of May 5th, thousands had gathered outside state capitals in Des Moines, Topeka, and Jefferson City. Tractors lined the streets. Small towns trembled with frustration. Protest signs were angry. The chants louder than they'd been in decades. "We feed the world. You starve us. Tariffs are taxes. Sell our grain, not our soul." In Nebraska, a protest escalated into a full blockade, halting grain deliveries to local elevators. In Ohio, demonstrators shut down highway access to a major ethanol plant. The message was clear: rural America was done waiting. At a rally in Illinois, a farmer shouted into a megaphone, "You call this America first. This is farmer last." Union leaders joined the movement. The National Farmers Union issued a searing statement demanding the White House end what they called an economic siege against its own producers. And while domestic tensions rose, global food security began to unravel. International food markets were showing signs of deep stress. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization issued an urgent bulletin warning that more than 90 million people could face food insecurity by the end of the year if the current tariff blockades continued. In North Africa, countries that had relied on US grain were now scrambling to sign emergency deals with South American suppliers. In East Africa, wheat shortages drove prices up by more than 30%. Food inflation, already high from the post-pandemic recovery, was now entering crisis territory. Countries around the world began hoarding supplies, slashing exports, and introducing their own tariffs to protect domestic stockpiles. The risk of a genuine worldwide food shortage was rapidly increasing. The World Trade Organization issued a grave warning. The global trade trajectory was unsustainable. Without urgent dialogue, the world could soon see a repeat of the 2008 food crisis, but so far, no such talks had even begun. Meanwhile, America's competitors weren't just watching. They were moving in to take its place permanently. While US exporters sat idle, other nations filled the vacuum. Brazil's soybean exports had doubled since March. Argentina was signing new grain and beef contracts almost weekly. Russia, already a wheat export powerhouse, was making new inroads into corn and sunflower markets across Asia. These aren't temporary deals. They are long-term contracts, major infrastructure investments, and new political alliances. Once signed, they don't revert. The global market isn't waiting for American farmers to return. It's replacing them. And now, the political consequences are hitting hard. On Capitol Hill, panic is spreading. Congressional approval ratings in key farm states are plummeting. Lawmakers from Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, and North Carolina are publicly breaking ranks with the White House over its trade policy. Some are even threatening to block budget bills unless immediate financial relief is sent to farmers. Behind the scenes, the administration is weighing a massive new round of aid payments, possibly as high as $20 billion. But even among Trump's closest allies, there's quiet acknowledgement. The damage has already been done. Farmers aren't begging for bailouts. They're asking for access to markets that may now be lost for an entire generation.